We'll do a review in Likkutei Sichos. This is in Chelik Chavtes, volume 29, and this is the third Sicha for the Parshas Re'eh. This is a Rashi Sicha, and as usual, as the Rebbe explains the Rashi, which is totally difficult to comprehend the details and the meaning, and there are so many problems and how the Rebbe answers everything that it fits in so smoothly and just fascinating how to understand the Rashi, how the Rebbe explains it. So we're talking about over here the pasuk before talking about the prohibited items, non-kosher items, the different animals, the different birds, the fish, different things. There is a verse that says, "Lo yiseichal kol to'eva," not to eat any abomination. So the Rebbe first explains why Rashi doesn't learn like all the other mefarshim or like some other mefarshim, that this is just another prohibition against eating non-kosher food, but which would be an abomination. But the Rebbe explains that according to Rashi, there has to be something new. We don't usually say it's just another prohibition. But in any event, the Rashi's details in the Rashi and everything, the way the Rebbe Rashi brings down, it's very, very difficult to understand the details in this Rashi, this whole Rashi. Rashi gives another suggestion, and the Rebbe basically comes up with a chiddush that the prohibition is here is not talking about a item which is inherently prohibited for everybody. It's not a ta'eva. Rashi is saying when it says lo yisoichal kol ta'eva is something sheti'afti loch, which is a personal abomination for that person. And that is what is the key to understand all Rashi. We'll go step by step and we'll see how everything falls into place. So let's start over here, Aleph. Oifum posik loy soichal kol toy eva. The verse says, don't eat any abomination. So what are we talking about over here? So Rashi is mafarish, coming up with sort of a new interpretation. What does it mean not to eat any abomination? Rashi says, Kol sheti avti loch, anything that I have made it for you an abomination. And Rashi gives an example. Kigoin. An abomination means something that you shouldn't do. As for example, Tsoirem oizen bechoir, a person will puncture the ear of a firstborn. Now, we know that a bechoir that is born, a firstborn in the animal, of the kosher animals, you have to bring him from those animals, you have to bring him on the Mizbeach. But one of the qualification to bring it on the Mizbeach, it has to be a Tomim, not a Balmum, without a blemish. According to Halacha, if you puncture the ear of the animal, that is called a mum. So what happens if you have a bechoir, a firstborn, and technically you have to offer it on the Mizbeach, but because you made a blemish in the animal, tzoram oizen bechoir, you punctured the ear of the bechoir, and the reason why you did it Rashi explains, why did you puncture it? Because you don't want to bring it to the Mizbeach if it's a hole, if it's a tomim, if it's not a mum, then you're supposed to bring it to the Mizbeach. But you punctured it kidei l'shachtei b'medina. You want to shecht it in the countryside, meaning outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and eat it over there. Now, Rashi says, "Haridovor sheti avti loch." This is something that I have made for you an abomination. In other words, you're not allowed to do it. One is not allowed to make a mum in the animal. As the Pasuk says, Kol mum lo boy. There should be no defect in the animal. Now, this verse itself, as you read it, doesn't say that you're not allowed to make a blemish. It says it's not allowed to have a blemish, which would normally mean that if the animal, the bechoir, would have a blemish, you're not allowed to bring it to the mizbeach. And in halacha, the Gemara and the Sifri, we learn out that there's actually an isur to actually make the blemish. But Rashi brings down the pasuk, Kol mum lo boy, and the Rebbe in the Ha'ara asks, where does it say that you're not allowed to make a blemish in the animal? It says the animal is not allowed to have a blemish when you bring it to the Mizbeach, but it doesn't seem to say clearly that you're not allowed to. So that's a question the Rebbe deals with, the Rebbe learns from another Rashi. But the bottom line, Rashi does say here, we're not discussing this at length, just in the heart over here, Rashi says this is abomination. The Torah does not allow for a person to go ahead and make a blemish in the animal. He went and took the bechoir and he made a blemish. Now, why did he do that? So he did it because he doesn't want it. Rashi says, "Kedei l'shoichtei b'medina." He wants to not to bring it as a carbon. So he made an abomination that the Torah doesn't allow him. He's not allowed to make a mum. He made the mum. So now he wants to go and shech the animal. So we're saying no. Loi soichal kol to'eva. Rashi learns cannot eat. This has become abominable. This has become asur because you did an isur. When you do an isur, then the food that is done, even though now you're going to shecht it and you can't bring it on the mizbeach, it's a balmum, the bechor is not fit for the mizbeach, but you are not allowed to make that mum in that bechor. The Torah says, "Kol mum lo yiyah boy." We learn from that you're not allowed to make a mum, and you went and did it. So, and the reason you did it is, Rashi says, because you didn't want to bring it to the Mizbeach. You wanted the Shachtei B'Medina. Haridover Sheti Avtiloch. This is something which I have made abominable to you, not to do that. As the Pasuk says, Kol mum lo yiyaboy, not to make any mum. Ubo v'lomet kan. So this Pasuk comes and teaches over here, lo yisoichal kol te'ivo. Shaloi yishochat v'yoichal al oisei hamum. That you can't go ahead and shecht it. Oh, it has the mum. The mum is that he did tzoram oizen b'choir. So now he says, okay, I caused the mum, and I'm going to shecht it. I'm going to eat the b'choir, which is no longer fit for the mizbeach, and is chulin is allowed to be eaten by Medina, Shechti Medina, but you are not allowed to. Why? Because you did something abominable. That means loiseichal kol ta'eva. That is abominable. And the Torah tells us yishchad v'yochal loisamu. You're not allowed to go ahead and shechter adam. So basically, if you do an avera, which the Torah doesn't allow you, that makes that meat or that food, it makes it treif. It makes it osur. It makes it an isur. Kol loiseichal kol ta'eva. If you went and you did something to the animal, and you made a mum which the Torah tells you not to do, then that's not going to therefore allow you then later on to go and shecht it and eat the animal. And you're going to say, well, it doesn't have a mum. No, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to yechel a mum. That's what the pasuk l'seichel kol ta'eva Rashi says. And then Rashi gives another example, l'gabe bosor b'cholov. The noch bringt Rashi at zweite dugma. Rashi brings another example. Von bishel bosor b'cholov, one cooked bosor b'cholov, meaning you did another prohibition. The Torah doesn't allow to cook meat and milk, and you went and cooked it. So since you cooked it, it's abominable. The Rebbe will discuss it later on. It seems very difficult to understand. I mean, basar b'cholov is asur on its own. Can't eat basar b'cholov. But here we're sort of saying, or the first that will bring down, Rashi's saying that since you cooked the basar b'cholov, which you were not allowed to do, so there is an additional prohibition now. Loiseichal kol ta'eva, you did something not allowed. Rashi gives two examples, but we'll discuss the basar b'cholov after we're going to be through with this first example that Rashi gives over here. But the first thing that the Rebbe wants to understand, Rashi learns over here that the new prohibition that we're learning over here is that when you take an item and you do an avera, then that item becomes osur. Why does Rashi not learn like the other Mefarshim say? We're not talking about an isur, a new kind of isur. Maybe we're talking about this is a general isur telling you not to eat all the abominations that the Torah will count, which are the treifah stuff enumerate later on. But the Rebbe said that wouldn't be a chiddush, so why is Rashi writing that? So it has to be something new. Let's look inside. Das haste. So what does this mean? How does Rashi learn? As the taich from loy soichal kol te'eva is. What is the translation? What does it mean? Don't eat any abomination. Is not that there's something abominable from before and you can't eat that. No, that's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about an abomination that you created, that you did an isur, then you can't eat it. As the Taich von Circle the Eve is, as Oibs is geton geworden in Azach, Apula was tiaftiloch, if an act was done in an item, such an act which the Eibishter doesn't allow that, tiaftiloch is that it's abominable to you, don't do that. Was Torah of the Aser Ton. The Torah prohibits you to do that. Is loy soichal. Then you're not allowed to eat it. Ver dizach osur ba'achile. It becomes prohibited by eating. Basically, Rashi has here another interpretation. Not the way it seems in the pasuk. You're not allowed to eat to'eva. You're not allowed to eat abominable things that are abominable. But Rashi is saying, if you did in this food, this item, you made it abominable because you did something wrong, then that food will become osur. Why does Rashi say that? Und der Tam, was Rashi learned, nicht in dem Posik, how come Rashi does not interpret the meaning of the verse, that when it says don't eat old abomination, is a hagdoma klolis to the parsha of Macholos Asuras. This is just a general introduction to the portion which talks about prohibited food. On kol ta'eva, when it says don't eat all abomination, it's talking about all the prohibited food. But sitzach to the macholis asuris, those prohibited food, why are they called abomination? Not because you did something abominable that you made an issue with them, as these are abominable to the pure soul, which means for a yid, that's why they're abominable. So why don't we say Leisechel Kol Ta'eva, which is about because it already has an Isser on it, not that you're creating the Isser. So the Rebbe says, is Val, the reason why Rashi doesn't say that in the seemingly simple way, is Val Vigeret Kama Pa'omim, because as we'd spoken many times, Avu Nor Meglach, that wherever it's possible, Darfman Einlernen, we need to interpret, we need to translate it as the Torah is oisen zu sagen anayim tzivui v'din, that the Torah is out to tell us a new command, a new halacha, not just to say, oh, it's a repetition. Already the pasuk is going to say later on, these things are abominable, you can't eat it. And here it says again, don't eat the abominable. Oh, you're going to say, well, it's another prohibition, two prohibitions, three prohibitions. No, we don't say that. We say that Torah is telling you something new by writing this, if at all possible. Sometimes Rashi does say it's too loud because he doesn't have an interpretation, but where Rashi has a choice, Rashi will not say just as a second law. Unit Zogan, Rashi doesn't want to say, normally, if he has the possibility, der Zivu kumt blois, moisiv sein noch Allah v'ashori in atzivim mefurish, that this command is coming only reason for saying it again. It's an additional prohibition and warning of something which is already very clearly commanded. All the psukim talk later on the commands what you're not allowed to eat, and here we're going to say, oh, this pasuk is saying again, don't eat it. A repetition saying the same thing. That's not the uh, first choice that we use. Therefore, Rashi learns the far learned Rashi, and that's what Rashi interprets as l'soichel kol te'eva is mechadish anayim sugis rachila. That when it says don't eat, and the abomination is coming to come up, this is a new category of eating, a prohibition against eating, not but normally. Which was man weiß nicht von früher dike psukim, that we don't know from previous verses, something new. We never heard this. This is something new. Kol sheti afti loch is osur b'achila. Anything that I made it abominable to you, which means I told you not to do it, is osur b'achila. Rashi is medayik behemshech pirushei, as Rashi says in the following of his commentary. Ubo velomat kan. So he's coming to teach you here. This is the place. We don't know it from before. Shaloi yishchat v'yochel, not to shecht and eat it. Now we're learning out a new, so you can see even in the language of Rashi, that Rashi is trying to tell you, what are we learning over here? Something new that we don't know from before. We know that you're not allowed to eat, shecht and eat something which you've done avera with, that you did abomination that I told you not to do and you did it. That makes the item treif. That's the chiddush, and that's why Rashi chooses to interpret it as that, as opposed to just saying something which is prohibited on its own. So the Rebbe explains, generally speaking, what Rashi is coming to teach us over here, and why Rashi learns like this. But what we have an issue is with the example of what Rashi is giving him over here, of puncturing the ear of the animal, of the Bechor. As the Rebbe will articulate, we know it's an Isser to eat something that come to an Isser. What is this example? And the Rebbe is going to take a lot of questions, how this is Osur and why Rashi chooses this, as we'll see now in Noise Base. Noise Base. The prohibition that Rashi mentions of causing a mum in the Bechor is not specifically for a Bechor. This is actually a prohibition on any animal which is kodesh, that a person that consecrated, the animal is kodesh, that animal needs to be, in order to brought on the mizbech, it has to be no defect. It has to be a tomim and not a balmum. And there's an isur, the same pasuk, when it says kol mum lo boy, that you're not allowed to make a mum, isn't talking about a b'choyer. It's talking about all kachim. That none of the kachim is allowed to have a mum, and none of the kachim are you allowed to make a mum. Why does Rashi choose an example from a b'choyer? That not to make a davar shetiafti loch a mum of a b'choyer. What about a mum of all the other korbanos? A matter of fact, the Rebbe brings down that in the Gemara, it seems to be a machloikis, whether the posik of kol mum lo yibah also even includes b'choyer, because there is a general difference. A kachim, a real kachim, not a b'choyer who is kodesh mileda, he's born a b'choyer. So if a b'choyer gets a mum, he doesn't have to redeem the b'choyer in order to go out to chulin. A b'choyer that has a mum, by definition, is not kodesh, and you don't have to exchange. You don't have to poida it in order for it to become non-kachim. So therefore, some opinion in the Gemara holds that it doesn't even apply the isur not to make a mum on a b'choyer. Why? Because they say a b'choyer, that opinion, that Manda Omar, they say a b'choyer, you could make a mum because the fact that you don't have to poida it after it has the mum, there's no isur therefore to make the mum. The pasuk is not talking about the b'choyer. The other, and it only talks about regular kachim, which you would have to redeem after it has a mum. So over there, the pasuk says you're not allowed to make the mum, and there's a machloikis both ways. But why does Rashi have to give an example from the case of b'choyer, which is not according to all opinions? Why doesn't he just say every psula mekudoshim? You're not allowed to make a b'choyer. If you should make a mum on kochim, which is psula mekudoshim, even if you're going to redeem it, you're not allowed to eat it because it says in our pasuk, you made the mum, but not after b'choyer. Let's look inside. Base, but therefore, wir verstehen the dogma was Rashi gibt von Zorem is in b'choyer chulu. This example that Rashi gives from one puncturing the ear of the b'choyer. V'bal der dover sheti avti loch beniden de dan. What is the item that I have made abominable to you that you're not allowed to do? What's the problem with the b'choyer? Pasuk says, is the ta'eva from kol mum lo yibay. Torah says you're not allowed to make a mum. There should be no mum there. You're not allowed to make the mum. Basret nit blois. That pasuk is talking not only wegen b'choyer, not just talking about b'choyer, nor wegen jeden zevach shlomim. Every offering of a shlomim, you're not allowed to make a mum. Pavos bringt Rashi the dogma davke. Why does Rashi specifically bring the example von Tzoram Eizem B'choyer, making the ear of the firstborn, boring that or causing to the ear of a B'choyer? Befrat as dos is nit a dover rogel The ha'hoiva. This is not a common, usual thing to make atzoram er b'choir, to puncture the ear of the b'choir. Rashi had gekon zogen by from clothing. Rashi could have said this in a more general way. Kegoin matl mum b'kochim, somebody who will make a mum by kochim, and then you're not allowed to eat. The shaila is not gresa. The shaila is even greater. Why does Rashi have to limit it to b'choir? Is on her own. The shaila is because according to some opinions in the Gemara, Itaka does not apply to a b'choir, and only by kochim. Why does Rashi have to get involved and use an example which is not according to all days? The shaila is not gresa. The Moker von Pirush Rashi is in Sifri al HaPosik. Rashi's source for this Kol Sheti Avtilach is from the Sifri and the verse. Aber dort bringt sich zwei Dees. There it's brought down two opinions. Rabbi Lezer Oimer Minayim Litzoirem Oizen Shel B'choir V'ochal Mimenu She'oiver B'loisase. Where do we know if somebody punctured the ear of the B'choir and then he eats from it, he shechted it and he ate from it. She'oiver B'loisase, that he violates the Loisase. Talmud Loimar Loisechal Kol Ta'eva. The pasuk says, don't eat any abomination, meaning that this becomes Asur Ba'achila because you violated the Isur, and therefore that means Loisechal Kol Ta'eva, you would be violating that prohibition. That's one opinion. That's the opinion of Rabbi Wolosow. Others say the pasuk is talking about those who were disqualified and they were holy already. They were kachim. They were sanctified. They were brought in for as a korban. They were designated for a korban, and they became disqualified. That's what we're talking about. What's the machlokes? So the Mefarshim explain what are the two opinions. As loy das achedim is tzoyrim oizen shel b'choir nit in geder from loisechel kol teva. That according to the opinion of achedim, who say only psulim v'gedoshim, when you puncture the ear of the b'choir, that's not defined of not eating teva. That wouldn't be. There would be no prohibition of the Torah loisechel kol teva for making a mum by puncturing the ear of the b'choir. Why? The Baal das a b'choir bal mum is muter b'achila on kain pidyon, since a b'choir that has a defect is permitted to be eaten without a redemption, which means a b'choir, you didn't do anything, you got a mum on its own. So you don't have to redeem a b'choir that has a mum. It just goes out because only a whole b'choir goes to the mizbech. If it has a defect, it doesn't go. So you don't have to redeem it if it got a mum. He says the riba nitkin dover metuaf. That's not considered something which is abominable to make a blemish in the ear of the b'choir, because anyways you won't have to redeem him. So it's cholin, and therefore you don't. It's not prohibited, and therefore it's not part of kol teiva. You won't be prohibited by seichel. Nor dafke, that's the opinion of the Chedim. Only specifically psulam gedoshim, when we're talking about those who became disqualified after they were kodesh. Was from free and pidyon zayt sumatis and achila. First, you must redeem them in order to permit them to be eaten. Zayin and zay in geder fun te'eva. So they are defined as an abomination. And that's why they're prohibited to be eaten. So, according to the Achedim, if a person punctures Tzoyrim Oizen Shel B'choir, he's not going to actually be prohibited to Leisechel. So Rashi brings a dogma. Why does Rashi have to bring it to limit himself like Rabbi Wolosow? Let him just say according to all opinions. Is nicht move on. Favos bringt Rashi the dogma von Tzoyrim Oizen B'choir. Why does Rashi bring the example of puncturing the ear of the B'choir? Und is der mit Machria, And therefore Rashi makes a decision that he decides like Rabbi Elazar, that even a Bechor, that you tzoyim the ear of the Bechor, it's an abomination and you're not allowed to eat it. Why is Rashi getting involved to decide Rabbi Elazar against the Acherim? Unzogt nicht the Poshete and Klolos di Kedugme. Why would he not say the more simple and the more general example from Sulam Kedoshim? Why is he limiting himself to that? Or the bringing blois the zweite Dugma bos bishel bosser b'cholov. Or maybe you should have just said the second thing, which I haven't learned yet. Cooking bosser b'cholov is an abomination. That Hashem asked it for you to cook it. So the Rebbe is, first of all, the Rebbe is asking, even without the Gemara, without the Sifri, without bringing down the Sifri, I said Gemara, but it's the Sifri, as the Rebbe says. Without bringing down these 2 days, why only talk about a B'choyer, not all Psuli B'Kedosh? And further, the Rebbe says, a B'choyer is questionable whether it's an abomination, whether it would be prohibited eating. Why does Rashi have to get involved and learn like Rabbi Elazar against the Acherim? Why can't Rashi just stick to Psulam Kedoshim, which is simpler, everybody agrees, and give that an example? Or maybe Rashi could have said the second example. What's the purpose of bringing down this Tzoram, the Oizen of the Bechor, the ear of the Vilmishpor? And the Rebbe is going to lead to the Rebbe to his conclusion, this problem. But the Rebbe has a further question in Ois Gimel. The Rebbe says, this lengthy language in Rashi. All right. So the Rebbe is going to take apart the different details that Rashi brings down. Oich Dartman Verstehen, also we need to understand the Arichus Loshen Rashi in der Dugman. Rashi's length of language when he brings the example. The L'chaire, Hot Rashi can zogen bekitzer, seemingly Rashi could have said shortly. Rashi could have just said, Kegoin, Tzoram Oizen B'choir, Haridovor Sheti Avti Loch Kol Mum Lo Yibay. Example is if you are tzoyim the ear of the B'choir, this is something that I have made abomination to you. And the pasuk is telling you, you can't eat that. That could Rashi have said. What does Rashi add? But Rashi writes more. Why is Rashi adding Kidei L'Shachtei B'Medina? That the reason why he made the blemish in the ear of the Bechor, since he doesn't want to bring it on the Mizbeach, he would rather eat the meat as chulin. He wants to shecht it in Medina. And therefore, that's why he made that blemish in the ear of the Bechor. Now, the prohibition against making kolmum lo yochal boy, making a lo yiboy, kolmum lo yiboy, making a prohibition against making a blemish in the Bechor is really not dependent on what your intention was. Even if your intention was just to make a mum, you would still not be allowed to do that. And if you did it, it should be asur b'achila. Why does Rashi say that because you had in mind to save it from having to bring it on the carbon, you want to do it kedei l'shachtem b'medina, so that you can shecht it in the country, not in the mizbeach. You're still going to be doing something abomination, even if you did not have the intent to shecht it, to go ahead and eat it. Aleph. Avos Rashi Meisif Aleph Kedei. Number one question we have is, why did Rashi add Kedei l'shechted b'Medina? That's why you shechted that's why you made the blemish in the ear of the Bechoir is because you want to shech the Medina. L'maynaf Kemina, what difference made what your purpose was? As the kavonos ha'odom be'srimas oizen abchoir, that the person's intention when he blemished the ear of the Bechoir is given kedei l'shech Medina, because he had in mind he wants to shech the Medina. And what would be afilu ben hot nit mekaving given l'shech the Medina? Even if you did not have in mind to shecht it in the Medina, you just made a blemish. You still have done something that I've abominated. The Eibush doesn't allow you. The Eibush doesn't allow you to make a mum in the Bechoir, whether you want doing it because you want to eat it over there or for whatever any other reason. You can't make a blemish in the ear of the Bechoir. Kol mum lo yirbai, the Torah says, don't make a blemish in the Bechoir. Then Rashi further says, uh, Khan, he comes to tell you, Rashi says, Shlo yishchad v'yochel. Pasuk says you can't eat it. Of course, if you're not going to shecht it, you're not going to eat it. So don't shecht it and eat it. Right? The Pasuk should have just said, Shlo yochel. Was darf Rashi zugeben dem Wort yishchad? Why does Rashi have to add that? The Pasuk is telling you, if you made the Bechoir, don't shecht it and eat it. Don't eat it. I mean, of course, you have to shecht it if you want to eat it. But you can't shecht it, you can't eat it. That's what we're talking about. And Gimel, uh, number 3, from them Siyum Loshen Rashi, Al Oisei Hamum, from Rashi's conclusion, Rashi says you can't eat it on that mum, is mashma. It appears that Rashi is saying, Rashi meant medayik zayin, Rashi meaning to derive and specify here, as davke Al Oisei Hamum lo yishchad, that if it only has that mum, then you're not only going to be an abomination. Aber neulad by mum achar, but if there's another mum, yishchot love, then you could shecht on it. That would be uh, very surprising. Rashi says that you made the mum, it becomes also bachila. But it seems you can't eat it for that mum. What happens if the animal, the bechoir, gets a separate mum? Then all of a sudden, no, then you can eat it. Even though you did an isur, then it becomes permissible. That's what the Lashon Rashi is. Al oiseh mum lo yishchat, on that mum lo yishchat. So why does Rashi have to say that? And then it doesn't really fit. It is not understood. What would happen if there's another mum? So first Rashi doesn't have to say it, and the idea is also not understood. Why is that the case? That if it gets another mum, let's see what the Rebbe says. Nit moving. Aleph. Was is der hechrech im Pshutei shel mikra? Where are we have the proof, the evidence that we have to say in the simple meaning of the verse, as a zweiter mum nimmt rob dem Isur Achila, was hat sich gelegt auf Bechoir mitzad lo yisrael kol teiva. That if there's a new mum, then all of a sudden it removes the prohibition. We weren't allowed to eat this Bechoir, because you are the one that did the mum, it's a dover shtiachtiloch. But if he gets another mum, and so we had a prohibition against eating l'sechel kol ta'eva. But if he gets another mum, now all of a sudden you can go ahead and eat it. Tzivas is neulot geworden in der behema nochamun. Should we then say, how do we rationalize this? How do we explain this? Just because there's a new mum, werd der mum bottle. So whether mum bottle die ta'eva was hat sich nie geschaffen. There's a new mum, so the previous mum, which created this abomination, it ceases to exist. Was hat sich nie geschaffen durch hatolos hamum beisur. So now that it has another mum, the Isur de Kemum that was created by the person puncturing Tzoram, the agent, the ear of the B'choir, oh, it takes that away. Why? Because he got another mum. What's the logic for that? Doesn't really fit. And Bays, and let's even say you'll find a reason that this is true in halacha, but why is it important for Rashi to tell us here? I feel it Bays, I feel in vet gefinnen hasbore bezeh. Even if you find some explanation why you would take away, he got another mum, why he takes away the first act of causing the ear, the mum. You find an explanation. Maybe you'll say, well, it has that mum. Now we found out it has a mum anyway. You didn't really do anything, but his Nachals didn't move on, but we still don't understand. Explaining whatever you want to explain. What difference does it make in the simple meaning of the pasuk? See that isur achila, black loyal, whether the prohibition of eating is always remains forever, or the blois bis b'macher, or it only remains until another moon is born. In other words, some other mishap, another defect happened to the animal. So what difference does it make to us to know that when the other defect happens, the first defect now all of a sudden becomes permissible to be eaten? Pirush Rashi is doch nit kesefer halachas. Rashi's commentary is not a book of laws, but that is the halacha that needs to caution and telling us how this idea is halacha. So why is Rashi even bringing this down? So first of all, we don't understand this halacha. How is it that after it already became not eatable because it was abomination that you made a mum? Now all of a sudden a mum happened, it takes it away. But even if it does, why do we need to know that it's uh, a prohibition that the that it's only a temporary and it's not. Why does it have to tell us Oisam? Who cares what would be the halacha there? But that's not something which bothers the traditional mikra. So basically, the Rebbe is asking on the Rashi's details over here. Why does Rashi say to shecht it in the country? That he's doing it because he doesn't want to Medina, that he wants to send it in the city. He doesn't want to shecht in the korban. Why not kimina? It's kolmum. You're not allowed to do it either way. The Rebbe in the Haor, by the way, brings down that this is actually in the Gemara. In the Gemara, the Rebbe explains that in the Gemara, the reason explained over there why you're not allowed to eat it, it's because of a knas. They punished you because since you shechted the animal with the intention of eating it, not bringing it to Mizbeach, therefore the Chacham say you can't eat it at all. Now the Chacham, that's we learn out from the Sheikhal, can't eat it at all. However, in Rashi, there is no pshat like that. In Rashi, it's not mentioned that because of a knas or anything. And the Rebbe brings down over here that Aderech Hapshat this is the it wouldn't make a difference what the reason is. It's not about punishing him, and therefore the Rebbe's question is, why does Rashi say that he shechted and that he made the blemish because he wants to shecht it outside of the mizbeach? He wants to not bring it as a korban. That doesn't seem to make a difference. It still should be a banam, should be lo. And number two, why does Rashi have the word yishchad v'yechel instead of just saying that you're not allowed to eat it? If you made the blemish, you did something wrong, and you can't eat it, becomes awesome. And the other thing is, why does Rashi say only if it has that mum? It seems from Rashi that if there's another mum, then all of a sudden it becomes kosher again. That same tzoram b'cher, what logic? And Why would that be the case? And why do we need to know that? So these are all the questions that the Rebbe has on the first example that Rashi brings down. Now the Rebbe will move on to the second example where a person does something which is prohibited, and that assers the food. And Rashi brings the example from Basar B'cholov, cooking Basar B'cholov. So let's look at Noish Dalet. And also we have a problem over here. Weiter sagt Rashi and zweite Dugma, Rashi gives a second example. What would be an item that I have abominated for you? That bishul basar b'cholov hari davar shetiavtiloch. To cook meat and milk becomes a matter that I have abominated to you. You're not allowed to Torah acid cooking meat and milk. So the Torah tells you now, v'hizir kan al achilosei. Torah says lo yiseichal, don't eat it. If you did an isur davar shtiavtiloch that you cooked when I didn't let it, then that things becomes usur. Seems like the isur achila for basar b'cholov comes from this pasuk because you weren't supposed to cook it and you cooked it. That's why it's also achila. But Rashi had already said several times that we have three times lo yisvashel gediba chalevi, and one of them is telling you isur achila. Why would we need to have this pasuk telling you that it's isur achila when it's already clear from elsewhere? Is temuav in meforshim frame. So this is surprising, as meforshim asks. Rashi hat schon zweimal mefarish given. Rashi had already explained twice, as begimul mekoimes nichta b'Torah, that in three places in the Torah it's written that tzivui from loisuvashel gedim b'chalevimai, the command not to cook the goat in its mother's milk. So we know that. Why does the Torah have to write three times not to cook the goat in his mother's milk with basar b'cholov? Why three times? And Rashi said it twice. Echad l'yisur achila. One place is, even though it says not to cook it, but one is for eating it. Echad l'yisur, no, one is to prohibit it to benefit, because basar b'cholov, you're not only not allowed to eat it, you're not allowed to even benefit. You can't sell it to a goy and use the money. You can't do that either. Echad l'yisur bishul, and one for cooking. So we know already that you're not allowed to eat it. Why do we need a separate prohibition of Isra Achilosoi to prohibit the eating? It's already osur because of the love of Kol Ta'eva. That anything about it, in other words, if you cooked and you weren't allowed to, why does the Torah have to write a third time l'svashel gedi? We know already, since you cooked and you weren't allowed to cook, so that item is also machila. Um, so the Rebbe says, Take in the Gemara, there are two separate opinions. One opinion says that you learn that you're not allowed to eat because there's three psukim. And the other one says you're not allowed to eat basar b'cholov because it says lo yisachal kol ta'eva. Okay, that's two opinions. But Rashi brings down already that three times the opinion. One of them is for Israchila. Why does Rashi have to say lo yisachal kol ta'eva means again? If you cooked it, you can't eat it, but we already know Israchil. Why do we need an extra pasuk for Israchila? Because since you cooked it, you did it over shtaftiloch, so then you're not allowed to eat it. Why do we need that pasuk? So the Rebbe explains. In the Gemara, these are two separate opinions. But Rashi bunches them together. The Mocker from the Pirush Rashi, Bishul Basar B'Chol is in Gemara. That's the Gemara. The Gemara says, Menayin lebosar b'cholov she'osur b'achila. Shenemar le'seichal kol te'eva. How do we know that basar b'cholov is osur b'achila? So one day it brings our pasuk, Shenemar le'seichal kol te'eva. Aber dort seien dort zwei Deis. Over there are two opinions. Ein man da Omer lernt das ab von Lesechel Koteva. One learns the Lesechel Koteva. Und ein zweiter man da Omer von dem, was Leis Waschel Gedi, steht Gimel Pomim. He learned because there's three times. Wer so aber nimmt on Rashi beide Lemudim Vedeis. But how does Rashi accept both of these uh, opinion? We learn it out Lesechel Koteva means Israchila, and then we have a third time Les Waschel Gedi, also in Lachil. Now, some of Farshim answer that there's two lavim, or that the L'Seichel Kol Ta'eva, which is an inclusive love, you won't get Malchus for it. So we have an extra pasuk of L'Svashel Gedi to get Malchus for Basar B'cholov, for eating Basar B'cholov. We don't know it, so we need both psukim. If some Meforshim answer, the love from L'Seichel Kol Ta'eva is nit mechayiv kemalchus. The prohibition of not eating all abomination from our pasuk does not make you liable for lashes from malchus. It's an inclusive love. You don't get malchus. Torah says don't eat kol ta'eva. It's not a specific. It includes all ta'eva. You don't get malchus for a lav shebichlolus. The river dap and hob them lav meyuchat from leisavashel. We need a special lav not to cook, which means not to eat basar b'cholov. Or if achilas basar b'cholov, or eating basar b'cholov, then you're going to get malchus for it. That's why we need a second pasuk. Aber der tiritz is masim b'limud aderech halacha. This is a good answer according to halacha, in the style of learning according to halacha. It says aber schwer azoy zu verantworten kavonas Rashi b'pirush la-Torah, but it's hard to answer that this is Rashi's intent in Rashi's comment to the Torah. We don't find in Rashi and the Torah to bring the rule as ein leikin alav shebeklolus that you're not going to get malchus for that. So to say that Rashi needs the second pasuk to get the malchus, Rashi doesn't say anywhere that you wouldn't get malchus for the first love of Lesechel Kol Te'eva, and therefore that's not something that we can answer. Rashi. Now, this last question that why do we need this pasuk? So we can say that this is for a second love. Okay, we said before we have a choice, but you're asking me on Rashi. Rashi contradicts himself. We're just going to address this level. So maybe this is the second love. So the Rebbe says, hey, you could have answered. This would be similar to Rashi saying in many places. As the Torah is Meisav Alav, the Torah adds a provision, they love it all over Shnei Lavim. Okay, it's in order to violate two Lavim. So Taka, there's Leishvash Gudi B'Chalevim, one is Achilles Basar B'Cholov, and from Leishach Kotayeva, Achilles Basar B'Cholov. Well, there's a bit in the Dan in our case too. As by Achilles Basar B'Cholov is Menayver of Shnei Lavim, that when you eat Basar B'Cholov, you're violating two Lavim. If we should say that, you see an interesting change in Rashi in the two examples. The example that he brings of Tzoram, Oizem, B'choir, and the example that he brings from cooking Basar B'cholov. By Tzoram, Oizem, B'choir, Rashi emphasizes, we learn it from here, that it's also B'achila. But when it comes to the Basar B'cholov, it doesn't say we learn from here that it's also B'achila. That would fit with the idea that we said, that we know that it's also B'achila because Leisvashel Gedi B'chalevim is also B'achila. But from here, we learn the extra, from that Basar, we learn, so we don't learn it from here. Rashi says this is going to be a Ta'eva. So that's also an example of a Ta'eva, but we're not learning. So the Lashon would fit well in Rashi. Based on this, we can also explain the change in Rashi's language. In the Erste Dugma sagt Rashi, in the first example, Rashi says, Ubo v'lomad kan shelo yishchad v'yachad. And he comes and teaches you here, not to shechtanit. Mashen came by Bishul Basar B'cholov, and Rashi gives the example when a person goes and cooks meat and milk, is a Meshanu and Zokt, over there it changes. V'hizir kan al achilos, he warned here against eating it, not, we learn from here, but he warned in eating it, that you're not allowed to eat the Basar B'cholov because you did an Aveda, you cooked it. Nit velomad kan shosu b'chilukei. He changes, he doesn't say you learn over here that it's also b'chila. So you see, not learning it in, that would fit, that we know that it's also b'chila from other pasuk. Weil bei Zoram eizem b'choir, wird der Israel b'chila abgelernt mikan. If you make that blemish on the ear of the b'choir, that prohibition of eating is actually from here. We don't know that it's also. Here is coming to teach you, don't shecht and eat it. But you can't say learning here. We know that you're not allowed to eat it. You can't say the bolum kan. Von dem, was steht, gib upon we know it says 3 times that you're not allowed to eat basar b'cholov. Und da ist das bloß, was es kommt zu an Azhore. It's an additional warning, not that it's coming to teach you the Isur. V'hizir kan al achilosei, he warned you on the eating. That would explain the change of Lashon. That would fit if we should accept that Rashi buys into this, that this is two lavim. One that we know is Asur, and here is another warning. But doesn't it get to this maspik? This is not a good answer, enough, vile. Aleph, soif, is the Rashi fortmadgish. Rashi still emphasizes the hizir kan achilosei. So what do you mean? He warned here. Okay, you're not saying Bava Lamed kan, but he says over here he warned about eating it. So them is mashma, that's what is kan. That's mashma, the warning is here. It's not like we know it from elsewhere. Nit as dos is netoise geworden noch azora. It's not that we added another azora. Even this Lashon Rashi doesn't say that this is just a additional. It seems like here is where the azora is. This is the warning. Beis void weaker. Number two, the question is, the main thing is the kavana for Rashi b'perusha if l'sechel kol teva. What is Rashi coming to tell us? What is the meaning of l'sechel kol teva? Is kenal sifalaf l'bsem. So Aroy is bringing us der poskum da nachidish. Rashi wants that this verse is come to tell us a novelty. Anayim din v'yisur. There's a new halacha, a new law. That's why Rashi, we're not saying that this is another law. That would be an easy way, but it's something new. That's why Rashi is not saying it is going on the Isur Achila that later on, the older abomination, because there's something new. If we pass to bring in the Reif Adugma from an Isur, so how does it fit to bring an example from an Isur in welchen the Pasuk Tutoni Tovki Chidush Din, in which the Pasuk is not telling us any novelty of Allah? The Rebbe earlier, right in the beginning of the Sikha, explained that why does Rashi not learn that Kol Ta'eva means all the abomination of the Pasuk talks about there in the Psukim about the non-kosher, because that wouldn't be a Chidush Din. So here Rashi brings you Din. What is the Tiafti Loch? Something which we already know that it's also. Und wie passt zu bringen der Rif Adugma von Isur in welchem the Pasuk tut doch nicht auf kein Chiddush Din. The Pasuk is not bringing up here, not a novel new din, nor it is blois moisiv at zweiten lav. We're adding an additional prohibition. Lav or lo b'shnei lavim. So how we can't say that? So we're back to the question. The Rebbe tried to answer the question. Why? How could we say that this is a lav when achila is also already osur? Why is Rashi saying that Torah is telling us over here? And the Rebbe tried to say maybe we're learning an extra. These are two separate. One is telling us the Malchus. One is this Hazorah. But the Rebbe says Rashi's trying here to find the new halacha, and if Basar is already osur, Basar b'chol is already osur, whether it's a new law or not, that wouldn't be explaining why it's Torah has to write l'seichel when we already know. So the Rebbe is going to come up and he's saying that actually this pasuk is talking about a whole new type of isur. The chiddush is not something which is usher inherently, but it's usher only to you and only because you are the one that caused it, as the Rebbe will continue to explain the answer in Ois Vav and on. Ois Vav. So the Rebbe said, "V'yeshloimar der biur b'kol zeh," so we can say the explanation is all in all this. The Rebbe's key chiddush is that Rashi is explaining that the pasuk is coming to include shete'afti loch, not something which is inherently metuav, because something which is inherently, which is abominable, because it's like not kosher. So why does the pasuk have to say don't eat that which is metuav? Of course, if it's metuav, means that it's not edible. That's why it is metuav. So why say don't eat it? What is metuav? Rashi Chiddush is here that the pasuk is coming to teach us even an item which inherently on its own is not metuav, but you are not allowed to do that, and that's the Chiddush over here. And this will explain to us the whole Rashi and all the details that I've asked before. Let's look inside. Rashi kum bavorna tmiya in the Verter loiseichal kol te'eva. Rashi is coming to answer a question that we have in the words loiteichal kol te'eva, not to eat any abomination. Kishel atzmei. On its own, these words just we don't understand these words. Vibal do retzich wegen Sachen. Since we're talking about items, the pasuk allein is a mitayr al soeva. The Torah describes them that they're abomination. Nicht uitzeichnig welche ze seinen. It doesn't say which ones, just saying these are abominable things. V'hainu. That means, asiz adover yedua mimokom achar, this is something which we know from elsewhere, as a zainen an inya shel ta'eva, that these are abominable. So these are, can't eat that which is abominable, which we know from somewhere else. That's why it doesn't say which ones, what is a ta'eva, so which means that which we've already know. V'hainu. Isn't it glatik? So what is the problem? It's not smooth. So what is the pasuk coming to accomplish over here to teach us? Don't eat anything that's abominable. If it's abominable, you can't. If it's abominable, you can't eat it. Since they are abominable, is moving as it darfen sein nitov. So for sure, you have to. They should be abominable, and you can't eat them by definition. That's what Rashi has to explain. Rashi says, "The pasuk meant asuk miyuchod in Toeva." The Torah is talking about a specific category in Toeva, in this abominable. And the Torah not said that you can't eat it. Then on your own, volt man it gewusst as is asur bachil. We would not know that that is prohibited. Und davke von der azhore, specifically when we have this warning, loy sochal, kol teiva, not to eat any teiva. Jede oifun von teiva, meaning any type of way that it becomes abominable, it becomes a teiva. Let it then up. That's how we learn as oich azat teiva, such a kind of a teiva is osur bachil, is also osur bachil. What are we talking about? That's what Rashi tells us. It's something which is only abominable because you can't do it. It's not the item itself is not osur. It's not an abominable thing. That we know that you can't eat, but we're not even eating something that it's only abominable to you because you did it. Und das is was Rashi is mechadesh. This is what Rashi novelty comes up with Blach Bascholas Pirusha. Immediately when Rashi starts to explain, Kol Ta'eva means Kol Shetiavti Loch. It's abominable to you, not Kol Ta'eva, whatever is abominable. It's abominable to you. You are not allowed to do that. Was that Goshe Bazeh is the word Tiavti Loch to you. Der Tivu is nicht in der Sache. It's not the object that is become abominable. Nor biyachas zum gavera. This is only as it relates to the person. Tiavti loch. It's abominable. You can't do that. So what does this mean? Hainu domain need der posik stam macholos asuris. The verse doesn't mean generally prohibited foods. Which are matters that are abominable on their own. They're abominable items. They're dvorim asurim. So, if you're saying on their own that dvorim asurim, that they're abominable, so how come only a yid a Jew is not allowed to eat them? What about? But if they're abominable, and we're saying on their own by definition, but the Rebbe says still, even though it's on the object itself, but it's only a yid, because a yid's special sensitivity to it, for him it's abominable. As the Rebbe says, the fact that they're only prohibited for Yidden and not for Bnei Noach, if they are in essence abominable, is because even something which is abominable, which is inherently Torah did not prohibit it to a Ben Noach, those who are not part of the Yidden. No, what is the Pasuk accomplishing over here, coming up with the novelty? The Pasuk anayin geder. As a Zainen faran zachen was tiavtiloch. There are such items that are only abominable to you. Der tiu is blois locha. The abominable is only to you, only to the person. B'yachas to dem gavra, as it relates to the person. Aber nicht as the etzach atzme is a davar metuv. It's not that the item itself is something abominable. Euch die Sachen, also these items, chod ze seinen nicht kein dvarim metuavim, although they're not abominable matters, they're not dvarim metuavim, is lo toichal, you can't eat them, even if it's only ta'avtiloch. And this is the flow, the Rebbe says, of the verses. Und das ist der Hemshech HaKsuvim. This is the flow of the verses. Noch dem wie the Torah sagt on dem Isur fun, lois is going to do. After the Torah instructs us with the prohibition not to cut yourself, not to make scratch wounds. So the Torah says, why? Mitzad them. You are a holy nation to God your God. And that Shem chose you to be his treasured nation from all the nations that are on the face of the earth. So after the Torah gives you that, is the Torah mamshich loiseichal kol ta'eva. Then the Torah says, don't eat any abomination. Kol shtavti loch, what is abominable to you. As di ta'eva is nor mitzad mailus Yisrael. That a abomination is only because you're a Yid. Als am kodesh l'Hashem elikecha. As a holy nation to Hashem. Therefore, to you, this becomes abominable. Yes, the other, even abominable things on their self are also not prohibited to the Goy. But because the Goy can do abominable things else. But this is a particular. We're saying that because of your sanctity, because this is good to do, because you're Am Kodesh, you can't even eat things that are abominable to you because of your doing. Zayin. If then bringt Rashi the erste Dugma, then Rashi brings the first example. What is this thing that is only abominable to you? So Rashi brings B'choyer Kigoyin, Soram Oizem B'choyer, that he punctured the ear of the firstborn. Und sagt nicht stam matil kum mum bekotcher. Rashi doesn't just say that you made a mum in kotcher. It says specifically. Why? Because Rashi, val davke by bechoir is mudgesh, because by a bechoir is emphasized, the mitzad dem dover gufo is the token tiyuv, that the item itself, there's no abomination. It's only the yid that does it, but there is no abomination in this thing itself. Und der tiyuv is blois mitzad agavra, and the abomination is only because the person does something wrong, but not that the item is in itself, and that's specifically by a bechoir. Other kochim that will make the difference, as we mentioned earlier. Other kochim, you need to redeem them after they have the mum. You need to redeem them. So that really means that there is a time that the animal is abominable before you redeem it, and it has a mum. So it's abominable, it's a ta'eva. So it's not fully l'cha. Ba'abechoir, you don't have to redeem it. Let's look inside. So it's only what you're doing, but it's not, there's no object that is ta'eva. Only l'cha. That's the whole key over here that the pasuk is trying to tell us over here, that it's abominable to you. But davke ba'abechoir is mudgesh the mitzad dem dover gufo is the talking to you. It's emphasized that the item itself, there is no abomination there. Und der tiv is blois mitzad agavra. The abomination is only the person. The Rebbe explains. By all kochim was a mum pasel the behemel mizbeach. By all kochim which the defect disqualifies the animal to the mizbeach, bleibt aber the behemes kochim bis mizis poide still. That behemoth remains until you redeem it. The mitzias from psula hamugadoshim. It is an entity disqualified kodesh. It is disqualified kodesh. Still kodesh, but it's disqualified. Koydem apidya. Before you redeem it, then it goes out to chulin. Is adover osur metuv mitzad. So at that time, it is abominable. The object, this animal, is dover metuv before you redeem it. It's only when you redeem it does it become permissible to eating. So it is an abominable object before you redeem it, but that's by all kochim. As opposed to a bechoir which has a defect. That is mutar b'achila on pedia, since you can eat it without redeeming it. Kumtoi, so it turns out, as in zayin mitzias, in the bechoir is nitoki dover metuv. There's nothing abominable about it. The chisorn tiv do. What is the problem? What is the abomination? Is blois misadam gavra. It's only the person. When by placing and making the blemish, mafkia gewen dem bechoir the gedusha to sein ruler mizbech. He took away from this firstborn the sanctity to be fit to the mizbech by making a mum. It's only about your doing, but nothing actually happened to the animal. But even after he did that, is there bechoir b'mum nitke dover me'tuv? It's not a abominable object. It's only the person's doing. Nothing happens to the animal itself. By a bechoir, you don't have to redeem it. Blois mitzadem vos hatolos mum b'bechoir is dover shetiafti loch. Only for this extra. You made a mum. This is, I have made it something abominable for you. You can't do that. And that's why Vertas also bachila. That's why it's also to eating. So the other things are going to be also eating because they are also going to be, they became abominable. But over here, the emphasis is to give you an example of something which is solely just you're doing and nothing transfers to the actual object of the animal. The pigeon takes that away, but without the pigeon, there is an abominable thing. And we want to say, culture ti'avti loch, something which is just because you're doing that too is also that the example is a bechor. Und der Fahr, und damit wird man euch verstehen, was Rashi, this also explain, where Rashi uses nutz darf the dogma von Zoram Eisen bechor. Rashi wants to say he made a blemish. Why do we have to say that he punctured, he made the ear of the Bechor? Because Rashi wants to emphasize more uh, that nothing really happened to the Bechor. It's just an act that the Torah prohibits because all what he's doing is he's piercing the ear of the Bechor, of the animal. And piercing is not a big deal. People pierce their ears all the time. Der nutzt dafke die Dogma von Zöhrem Eusenbecheur und nicht an anderen Mum, not a different Mum. Weil damit ist Rashi Madgish, Rashi emphasize, Ado hat sich nicht geschaffen durch Atolos, Ado hat sich nicht geschaffen durch Atolos Mum, that by making the Mum, you did not create Kindover Metu in the Becheur. Nothing abominable really happened in the Bechor. I feel it moving Gashmi, Kipshuta, even not physically in the understanding. Not you didn't do anything really to the Bechor. Vorum Tzrimas ha'oizen, the piercing of the ear is nit kemum. Was is Pegeya Be'ezer Evenshu. It's not such a kind of defect that would impact in any way, in any form, in the behemoth puloso. It doesn't impact the behemoth and its activity. Nothing is done to the animal itself. So you see that there's really, even physically, nothing happened to the behemoth. But doesn't affect the behemoth. That Inyan Futzrima Soizen, the idea of piercing the ear is a dover hanog, but is something which is accustomed and it's common even by human beings. So, see, you're seeing the only reason is because you took out the Bechor from its Kedusha, but even though you didn't do anything, now it's not fit. That is Ti'avti Loch. That's what you did. And also we'll understand Rashi is Moisiv, B'dei l'shechte b'Medina. Rashi says to shecht it outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So Rashi is saying to shecht not like that he's trying to take it away from Kochim and he's bringing it to Chulin. Rashi wants to say that even though this whole piercing is in order to eat it, so it's not even a tsar for the animal, because when you eat it, you're allowed to be mitzar. So it just doesn't add up to anything that you did outside that you're taking away from Kochim and bring it to Chulin. And the emphasis is, I want to eat it. So what value or what significance is there that it's piercing the ear of the animal? Rashi's mostly the Shechti Medina. The mit is Rashi Shelo Nochmer. Rashi comes to more negate. As I feel der Tsar was the behema hot from Srimas Oizen. Even the pain that the animal has from piercing the ear can not gerechnet werden als a davar bilti ratzei. We cannot count this, that this is something wrong. Didn't even cause any pain, or the pain cannot be considered wrong. So saying shechte means he wants to eat it. Und as zu lieb achilas odom rechnet man sich nicht mit Zara behema shebi shchitoso. We do not consider the pain of the animal when shechting it. Unalachas kam v'kamo, and so much more so, as hot nit kin or zu rechnen sich mit dem Zarach, wie Behema, Zarach, Mut von Zribasois. Any tsar that the behemoth has to shchita, we don't care when it's for eating. So the little bit of pain when you have from piercing the ear is certainly he didn't do anything. Oibas durch dem, that the behemoth can genutzt werden lachila. So Odom, it can be eaten for the person's eating. So that's why Rashi said he wants to shecht it. Um, so this is all emphasizing, all what he did here was um, took out the animal from its kedusha by making a mum. Yes. And here the Rebbe says a gewaldike chiddush over here. Since the whole Isser is because you are the one that did it, so the loisoichal that the pasuk is talking about would not be for everybody. It will only be for the person that did it. Because the Torah is loch, you did it, so you can't eat it. Other people can eat it. Not only that, you cannot only not eat it if that's the only thing that moment that the animal happens. But if there's another mum, and therefore it's not loch, you didn't do it, you didn't do anything. It doesn't matter that you did it before. But it's only also because it has this new category because you're involved. That takes away the issue. You can go ahead and eat it. Let's look inside. Sim Lashon Rashi, the end of Rashi's language. The pasuk is coming to teach us here that you can't shecht and eat on that defect. Ibald as in der behema is the talking to you. Since in this animal there's no abomination, sis nor vos the afti loch. You are not allowed to do it. It's abominable for you. Torah yaser them gavra to ton those. Torah prohibited the person to do this. Und der Fall is loiseichel that you should need it. Is there isur loiseichel aderech hapshat? The Rebbe said according to pshat, loiseichel, nor if them gavra, nor only that person who did it, he's not allowed to eat it. But so everyone if them tiaftiloch. You violated what I told you not to do. You can't eat it. Mashenkin by andere, as opposed to others, was by Zay is not given the Pula Surah. They didn't do the prohibited act. Is the Zach allein und the Zach allein is doch nicht kind over to. The item itself is not abominable. Is the talking Israel is no Israel. A gewaltige chiddush that the pasuk is only talking about Sichos kol te'eva is the person that did the te'eva. He can't eat it. Others can. Und das is Rashi medayik, and that's what Rashi says. Baba Lamed Khan Shelo Yishchad v'Yochel is coming to teach you, don't shecht and eat it. Not that it's become osur. Nit as der Bechor is geworden osur b'achila. We're just telling you, don't shecht and eat it. You're not allowed to eat it. Nor there is blois an isur egdem odom v'sorom eizum Bechor g'del shachtoi. Only the person. You blemished the ear of the Bechor in order to shecht it, as who lo yishchat lo yishchat v'yerot givol. You wanted to shecht and eat it. No, you're not going to do it. Lo yishchat v'yerot. Pasuk is saying it's the person, and this is you can't get what you wanted to, and you can't eat it. Base. And the second aspect is oiseh hamum. Only that mum. Warum der Bechoir is nicht geworden Osur Bachila. This Bechoir is not prohibited eating. It never rests, never lands on the Bechoir Isachila, only on the person. Uns is nicht gedover metuv. It's not an abominable item. Es is nor was of them Odom Shetzoram Eizem Abechoir is done Isur Shachta. It's only that the person who punctured the ear of the Bechoir, there is a prohibition to shecht it. Mitzad Zayin Pula Asura, because his prohibited act of making a blemish and taking it away from Kodesh. The day is on the sky sein machshavtoi. The day is on the sky werden machshavtoi. So because he did a prohibited act, in order what he's trying to accomplish, that his thought was he's going to tzoram oizim chuluk de shachta. He wants to go ahead and shecht it so that he can eat it like that. But nor mitzadem is as afterlach. That's the only reason why it became a boundary. You don't eat it. It's mele verstandig. So therefore, it's understood. As if there's another blemish, von der Beheme is Saivi Nifki geworden gedush Sabachol Mizbech. From this Beheme, in any event, the kedusha has been taken away. It has another move. Is the talking or faran isur mitzad kol shtavtloch. So there is no room for the prohibition that I've prohibited to you. Because even if he didn't do anything, the behemoth was still gonna be eaten. So there's no tiaftiloch if you are not the one that is. You may have caused it before it got the mum, but once it gets the mum, you did not cause it. There's no object that became te'avtiloch. It became your act, but your act didn't do anything because the behemoth is not kodesh anyway because of the Israel, and that's why you're not allowed to eat it, and that's emphasized after it has the mum to point out that it's only the gavra and not the object itself. Tessa, because there is entered the passion the zweite dogma von Rashi. Now we understand simply the second example that Rashi brings, bishel basar b'cholov, that he cooked the meat in the milk. Rashi is medayik b'l'shoin. Rashi is very precise in the language. Bishel basar b'cholov, this thing that he did wrong, that he cooked the meat in the milk. Nit v'loshen ha-gemoreh, unlike the language of the Gemara, menayin lebasar b'cholov she'asur b'achila. Where do we know that it's prohibited in eating? We're not telling you here that it's prohibited in eating. We're talking about cooking the basar b'cholov. V'aloit shitas Rashi b'pirush al-Torah pshuta shemikra. According to Rashi's view and his commentary on the Torah and the simple meaning of the verse, is der ganze Isur von loisoichal kol te'eva, the entire prohibition of not eating any abomination, nor an inyan b'shaychus to the gavra. This is only a matter as it relates to the person. V'chat overgiven, who violated, ungeton, apula suri, did an act which is prohibited. Afila when in der zach is netoken in shaltiyuv. Even if there is no abomination of the object that you did it, but the person violated and did an act that was also not transferred to the object. The object itself, nothing happens. So Valderach Binyanenu, the Isur von Achilas Basar v'Cholov was abgelernt von Leisechel Kol Te'eva. What are we learning of Isur Basar v'Cholov von Leisechel Kol Te'eva? Is nicht verbunden mit dem Guf HaMeichel. It's not connected with the food itself that it's Basar v'Cholov. That's not what the issue is here. Nor mit dem Gavre was it overgiven, Mavashel given the Basar v'Cholov. You cook the Basar v'Cholov, you are the one, Tiafti Loch, that are causing the Isur by cooking it. As to live Zayin Pula Asura, is der Meichel is Farim Neser geworden. It became prohibited to you. Der Meichel mit an Isur Neusar Bachilosei. It's not generally for eating, but you cooked it, you did an act of Tiafti Loch, you have an additional isur b'achilose. Not everybody who's going to eat that meat that he cooked, he's going to have one isur, the lav of achila. The person cooking it gets a lav for cooking it because he violated. That's the aftilach. So here's if he's going to eat it, it's going to be once for eating basar b'cholov from the 3 times and once because you are the aftilach and you've done it. But other people, Maschenken, andere Iden, was haben nicht gehört, dem Isur von Bishul Basar B'cholov. They had not violated the prohibition of cooking meat and milk. Seinen nicht Osur in them mitzad Leitechel Te'eva. They're not prohibited. They didn't do it. So Te'eva Leitechel Te'eva is for the one who does it. Now Blois mitzad them was given pom nichta b'Te'eva Leitechel. Te'eva writes 3 times, so there's an issue of eating Basar B'cholov. But not this additional issue for violating them, for doing it te'aftilach. This is Rashi medayik. Bishul basar b'cholov behizir kan al achilosei. He cooked basar b'cholov. The Torah tells you here. The Torah tells you eating it because eating that thing that you cooked. Not eating basar b'cholov, eating the basar b'cholov that you cooked and you did a violation, tiafti loch, there's a new issue here. But that pasuk went up on Azhorim Yuchedes. We learn a very specific warning. Hizir Khan warned here. So then was bishul basar b'cholov. That only applies to the one who cooked that basar b'cholov. He did something that was abomination to you. He did it, wasn't supposed to. But those bring the risk canal. This brings even more the advantage, the greatness of the Yidden. A holy people to Hashem, and for doing something you already make it you can't eat it. He chose them to be his treasured nation from all people on the face of the earth, as the pasuk says. And this is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Re'eh Tovshin Daled Mem.